Hey guys, what I've got here is a Teraflex high angle CV joint for a Jeep JK. I just opened the box. The bearing looks good, looks very nicely built. It may actually just be a factory bearing, I'm not sure, but it's well put together either which way. The boot is of course nice. Included in the box, you'll see there's a backer plate. The gasket on this backer plate looks a little damaged, but I don't think it'll affect anything. Comes with all the hardware you need: new snap ring, new bolts, the band for the front of the CV joint. Comes with grease. Grease looks like it's probably not enough, but I guess we'll see. Comes with thread locker, and comes with the ball end hex head for the new bolts. And this piece right here is what really makes a difference in this joint. The rubber is a little bit thicker here, and the flange is wider, and because of the way it's made, you've got more room for that drive shaft to articulate without destroying the boot. A damaged CV joint has a very particular sound to it. There's some other indicators as well, but that sound is what really makes you look at the joint. And I've got a video that I'm going to include here of me doing a wall climb at Poughkeepsie Gulch in Colorado, and you'll hear the distinct clicking sound that really steers you towards looking at the CV joint. Did you hear that distinct clicking, that kick, 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 especially when the vehicle was pulling and under load? That sound is the sound of a CV joint. Another name for a CV joint is an RZIPA joint, if you're curious. This Teraflex kit looks good. It's got everything in it you should need. Maybe a little more red grease. Guess we'll see. So we're going to look at the Teraflex video and see if it shows us everything we need to know to change this joint. Whenever you change any CV joint, the most important part of the process is the grease. Having the grease in the joint, in all the voids, and doing things to make sure the grease stays there. Sealing it properly, torquing it properly, all those sorts of things. So let's get into this change and see if there's anything we run into that's a problem. Okay, here we are under the JK, and I'm going to show you some other ways to diagnose a CV problem. Just for perspective, that there is the transfer case, that there is the transfer case output shaft to the front axle, and those are the bolts, and that is the CV joint. So you see that grease right there along the heat shielding, that splatter of grease? That is a classic sign that the CV joint boot is blown. And if you stick your finger in that hole there, obviously not while the vehicle's moving, you will see that boot is in fact torn and has been pumping the grease out of the joint, allowing the joint to overheat and destroy itself. I've been voiceovering this video thus far because the rain was so bad on the day that I did this project, you couldn't hear anything I was saying. Right here I'm removing the armor off the bottom of the Jeep, and I got really lucky with jack placement. I was rather proud of myself, so I figured I'd include my reaction here.
Oh, look at that. Did I get that thing in the middle of the weight? Boy, it looks like I know what I'm doing right there. Boy, look at that. Boy, man, y'all need somebody to show y'all how to do something. Y'all need to call me. I got it all figured out. Oh, stop right there before we fall off. Look at that. I'm just going to leave that there. Isn't that nice? Blind squirrel got a nut. Alright, so the rain's slowing down. This bolt right here is an 18 millimeter, holds on the transfer case armor, and it is boogered up from getting hit by rocks. So an 18 millimeter socket, like that one right there, doesn't fit on it. So I get to use a tool I haven't used yet on anything seriously, and that is the Snap-on 12-inch Part number is FAD-H12B, and it's basically the Bajo made crescent wrench with the teeth on it. And I'm going to use it to pull this bolt off, I hope. Now, again, this is my first time using this thing. I can tell you the teeth are not a gimmick. When I get this bolt off, I'm sure there'll be a skip, because I'm sure you're not going to want to watch me turn this thing all the way off with a crescent wrench. But when I do get it off, I'll show you the nut. So here's that bolt. You see those shiny points on the corners? Well, not really. It's not really on the corners, it's just inside the corners. Those shiny points are where the teeth on that wrench have grabbed in. And some of this, if you look, that's all distortion from running over rocks. So it definitely bites on the fastener. And show you those teeth. See those teeth there? They do work, and they are hard, and they do bite. And the wrench, you know, a lot of these, you know, these adjustable wrenches will walk open as you're using them. I didn't find that this one did that. Of course, it's new-ish. I did get it off eBay. It's insanely priced new. It was like $100 new, and even on eBay, the guy had it listed for like 80 bucks, and I made him an offer of 65 shipped, and he took it. So, I mean, $65 for a used wrench is pricey. Alright, so in the Teraflex video, they had the Jeep lifted to where the front, they could spin the front axle. Obviously my tires are on the ground, so I can't do that. I was, however, able to break all these bolts loose. There's 4 15mm bolts on this pinion side of this joint here, this U-joint. I was able to break them all with the Milwaukee Impact with a Harbor Freight 15mm wobble on it. However, the top bolt and that other side bolt there, just because of the position of my axle, I can't get to them, so I will have to finish those off with a wrench. But I did not have to lift the front end to do it. So if you've got the right tools, you won't have to lift the front end to accomplish this goal, even though that's what they have done in the video. Okay, in the Teraflex video, I believe this exhaust cross member was removed to get the shot. That's a whole lot more work than I care to do to remove these bolts. They're accessible on this side here. You can spin this whole thing. Okay, so in the Teraflex video, they showed once you take the 5/16 bolts out to hold the CV joint to the transfer case, that you can pry it with a screwdriver or just give it a bump. The bump with a rubber mallet wasn't going to work. See that right there? That's where it was basically rust welded to the transfer case output shaft. So it took a chisel and some pretty good hits to get it loose. It did come loose, of course. But anyhow, let me show you what a bad CV joint looks like. First of all, see how I can move that thing around? See how this one, it takes all I've got to move it around? That's a nice joint. This is a bad joint. And then watch this. Hear that click? That click, that noise there when it's under strain is that click you hear in the video that I put up at the front. And that boot tearing at an angle, you know, it's at an angle, it gets stretched and pinched, and then ultimately tears, lets all the grease out, and that's the start of the end of the joint. So now that we've got it off, and like I said, I mean, that's just waiting to fail. So now that it's all off and open, I'm going to go ahead and pull the joint off the shaft, do the same thing that the Teraflex video shows, and then I'll show you the shaft end. Alright, so here it is all apart. Here's the snap ring that retains the CV joint on the shaft, and here's the little clip that retains the front of that CV boot on. I didn't wrestle with the clip, I just cut it off with those Irwin NWS made pliers.
All this will need to be cleaned off real thoroughly with brake clean, and this will need to be packed real thoroughly with clean grease. They do a good job in the Teraflex video of explaining the value of greasing this well. If that's lost on anyone, the life of this joint is fully dependent on a perfect packing of grease. All right, so in greasing the joint, the Teraflex video says don't be afraid to move the joint around to get grease into all the voids. I'm gonna say that a different way. Do be afraid to not move the joint around and get grease in all the voids. The joint is designed in such a way that it will not fall apart. So you should, and this is true of every CV joint I've ever seen, it's basically an enclosed unit. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to bottom it out, and when you bottom it out, you'll see voids along the race for the bearings in that center retaining clip, and you'll want to push grease into those areas, and you want to get grease all the way around it real nice. And then after you do that, you'll want to clean off that flat area just inside the bolts. You'll want to clean that off super well. I just rubbed a little grease right back on it. I'll clean it again. So you'll have an area that you'll want pristine, clean, no grease on it, right next to an area fully smothered in grease. So that gets a little tedious. What I did was I used strips of shop rags. The reason I use strips of shop rags is so that if I got a little bit of grease on a strip, I could throw it away so that grease wouldn't re-emerge in another spot. I could just get rid of that one and start over. Anyhow, once you get to that point, you're ready to put the joint together. This flange is built in such a way that you have to put the bolts in before you can put the joint together. So I've got it sitting on there. I don't know what they'll do in their video. They'll probably put it all together and put it on. I'm just kind of doing it this way. It's going to end up with the same result. In the Teraflex video, they show this area just smothered in grease as they're putting on the CV joint onto the drive shaft. I do not think that is a good idea. That is not what I did. The reason I don't think that's a good idea is because if you, like me, will likely have to give this a little tap to get it on. And basically you can tap in these areas here, nice and gentle, watch what you're doing, don't scar anything up, take your time. And then you also have to put the snap ring on here. So if this is smothered in grease, you're not gonna get a good idea whether or not that snap ring seats. All right, even with my lower amount of grease, that snap ring was a little tricky to get seated. What I do whenever I have a snap ring that doesn't just really snap in is I reverse my snap ring pliers. So now these are set for like if this was an internal snap ring. And what I do is I get in the holes, I give them a good squeeze just to make sure that snap ring is well seated. And that's just something I do. I don't know that it's any use to anybody. Sometimes you can hear it clip in, but there's been more than one time I've done that, and you get that last little bit out of that snap ring, and that's what you want, is a good seat. So now, after this is done, now you can grease all of that and then put the cap on the end. If you run out of grease, it's not a big deal. This is just red grease, guys. This isn't magic Teraflex juice. This is just regular old red grease. Okay, so one thing the video did not mention from Teraflex is the boot clamp until after you're at this point. I went ahead and, if you look back at the video, I put mine on and just kind of had it hanging on the shaft. You will want to do that too. You don't want to get to this point here where it's all installed real nice and then, dang, now I got to dissect this thing to put it on here. Just have it hanging there, and you can put it in your CV boot clamp tightening wrench like you want to. Another thing they did that I didn't like was dude took pliers. Obviously he didn't take snap ring pliers, but he took regular pliers and gave this a squeeze all the way around. And they said, oh, well, he's doing it with just enough pressure to not let it fall off during installation. What I did, I like that he did the making sure it's not going to fall off, but what I did to do that is I took, these are the retaining clips that put pressure on the front of the factory CV joint. I took those and put them here like such, and I took a nice pair of vice grips with a wide pressure area and I squeezed like that. And the reason I did it that way is so that I didn't create any kind of peaks or cracks in this with the with regular pliers. He just squeezes here and here and here all the way around. And again, he's not putting much pressure, but it doesn't take much pressure to bend this. So anyhow, put this on before you start putting the boot on, and when you go to squeeze this, keep those little clips off of your factory boot, and they'll help you out. They recommend starting these by hand. I found that to be awfully difficult. I was able to get one just kind of holding the end of the socket. Actually, I had an extension in it. I was holding the end of the extension like it was a screwdriver. And I got one started, and then on one side and then one on the other. And after that, I put the extensions in the M12 and I set it on level 1. And at level 1, you get a real slow, real controllable action, and then I can handle the ball end socket and really control that bolt and get them in. And I got them all started that way, and then I worked them in, and they said to set it in evenly, and that makes good sense to make sure you get a good seal on these gaskets. So I worked them in, spinning it, working them in, and then when the bolts were just coming to the back of the flange is where I made sure they were all even all the way around, and I came a couple threads up and then a couple threads up, and that fourth thread up is about where they bottomed out at. So now I'm going to switch to torquing them down. The torque's 15 foot-pounds. I think I've got it set at, it's probably 16.5 foot-pounds. And the reason I've got it set like that is because I've got an extension here, and then we're using a ball socket. So we're kind of off to the side. I'm not sure that 15 foot-pounds is going to communicate all the way through without without a little extra love, I guess is where I'm going with that. So here goes. Oh, you son of a biscuit eater. This is going to be a pain in the rectum. All right, I'm sweaty. Torquing these bolts down is the hard part of this deal, doing it by yourself. There's really just no easy way to do it. I was basically, it's only 15 foot-pounds, which is not a whole bunch, but you're coming in at an angle here, and you end up with your torque wrench, kind of the end of it kind of floating here. So I was holding the arm. You can see my thumb is red there. That's from resting the torque wrench against it, the head of the torque wrench, to be able to twist it. I torqued around the whole thing twice, and I can assure you that I will be using a cutoff wheel and a stud puller to pull at least 2 of those bolts off the next time I change this thing. And that's because they're fairly well stripped out. So my suggestions for this part, when you're torquing the new one on, is it would really help to have an extra set of hands at this point. So that's one. The second thing, they send you this ball 6mm. This ball 6mm is a free ball 6mm and holds to the fastener just like a free ball 6mm would. Take the time to go to Snap-on or to Wera and get a proper 6mm ball long. Either one of those companies I would recommend, either Wera for their Hex Plus. I don't know that they have it in this ball end, but that Hex Plus would be good. And then if not them, then the Snap-on, because this no-name brand Chinese is you're gonna strip a bolt or 2. Having a buddy will help a bunch, but you get what you pay for with the free socket there. So that's that. And then all I've got left is thread locker and those 4 bolts, and to torque them down. So here we go. All right, front bolts are torqued, 81 foot-pounds. And just to give you an idea of what the finished product looks like as far as it being worth your money, let's see if I can show you the actual joint at the bottom. Let's see, I'm going to zoom in on that. That's a crappy picture. Okay, right here. All right. It is nowhere near touching. I can run my finger almost all the way around that joint.
Alright guys, for those of you thinking of replacing your CV joint with the Teraflex joint, I hope this video helped you out. For the rest of you, I hope it was at least mildly interesting. Thanks, and like, comment, subscribe. Thanks guys.